The first fact that I would like to share with you is that there is a recurrence in the archive of literature on quote-unquote democracy. And that recurrence is an admission that democracy means different things, or has been practiced in different ways by different peoples in different geographies and times, and indeed through different institutional arrangements. I think if I were to say that this recurring admission happened in each decade for the last 50 years, that you mightn't see anything that special about this, right? It's only natural that in a world where the word democracy has come to be synonymous with the word good, that many different sorts of people and different sorts of places have tried, whatever the reason, to make democracy happen, to make it work in some way that suited their various cultures and contexts or dastardly plans. I do, however, hope that it may surprise you to hear that this admission that democracy means more than one thing has been recurring for not just the last 50 years, but for the last 510 years. In fact, this admission has been made at least once, and almost certainly many times, per decade for the last 51 decades, counting back from our own now. That was a bit of nifty work to trace these things along down the line. Now, to avoid overwhelming you by giving 51 such examples, I'll offer just one example per century, starting in the 1500s and working up to the present. There is a text called the Satire Manipée de la Vertu de la Catholicon d'Espagne, which Leah Schwartz claims to have been written during the French General Assembly, their État Général, in 1593. The author of that text writes, "With the election of a new king, we can say that the matter of how we are to govern ourselves has been decided. But this has not occurred without dispute. That's because there are those who propose that it would be better to form republics like those of the ancient Gauls. Others demand an anarchic democracy. Still others demand Athenian oligarchy." Note how this author does not consider Athens to be democratic. In 1685, Avelot de la Houssaye writes about democracy in their Histoire du gouvernement de Venise. The author avers that in their time, democracy means popular government, as can be seen in Holland and Switzerland. However, there's a species of democracy called ochlocracy, which is when, the author explains, the majority of people have more power than the educated, the skilled, or the middle classes. In Venice, this ochlocracy was accomplished through the use of consuls and tribunes. Moving along, in 1771, Voltaire writes in his Questions sur l'encyclopédie par des amateurs that as far as he is aware, republicanism is a natural state of human organization. It can be found in North America, South America, and in West Asia. Voltaire claims that the Turkish Empire was a republic of janissaries who strangle the sultans that displeased them. Voltaire's phrasing here shows that he is aware of the pre-colonial republic of Tlaxcalan. The autonomous state of Tlaxcalan remains, of course, in present-day Mexico. And Agustin, I hope I'm pronouncing this state correctly. Okay, good, I practiced that. So Voltaire was also aware of pre-colonial republics in North America, although he says they were run by bears. He was aware of Marathi and Sikh nations in India, although he says Sikhs elected a chief before they go to plunder. And he was also aware of city-state republics in North Africa that he claims were run by soldiers and pirates. Make of that what you will. In 1817, Jeremy Bentham writes that his plan of parliamentary reform includes this idea that there in the United States you have not one democracy only, but a whole cluster of democracies. This is later followed by the quote, "Look not to Greece and Italy, look not to ancient or Middle Ages, look not to any self-acting democracy. Compared with the democracy here in question, compared with representative democracy, a democracy in which the sole power exercised by the people is that of choosing their deputies, and in those deputies their rulers, whatever else has been called democracy has had nothing of democracy but the name." In 1947, C. Wolf writes that the student must not assume that those types of society which are known today as democracies are the only truly democratic forms. The Republican representative form of government in the United States is but one type, and the good American might think that this is the best type, but surely it is not the exclusive one. There are many variations on the theme. Finally, in our century, there's, for example, Jacques Rupnik and Jan Zielonka, who wrote in 2013 that there are hundreds of different definitions of democracy in use today, which list a variety of factors that allow a given regime to be classified as democratic or not. There's a problem here that we're just starting to get a hold of, as if the problem were a piece of land, and we, good pirates of Tunis, Algiers, and Corsica, are just starting to get sight of it. The problem, the sense of it, is that if democracy means many things, then people may agree or disagree, just as we saw in our little exercise earlier. And it is in their difference that they find opportunities to gather meaning, to practice this give and take, to maybe offer up a little of what you would prefer so that you can get along and get the job done. If you don't do that, or if you really dig your heels in, there's every real chance that you'll end up with quite a bit of confusion and a lot of argument, right? Now, there's something of a tradition across the democracy-related literature when it comes to getting around the problem of democracy's many meanings and the confusion that risks ensuing from this. And that tradition is when writers disclose to their readers what they mean by democracy. And there really are a marvelous assortment of ways that this has been done. But sometimes this disclosure doesn't happen. I think we can all recall various papers that do this, and it seems like the writer is completely unaware in these situations of democracy's semantic pluralism, or maybe they just simply don't care for that condition, and they think instead that their audience will either know immediately what they're talking about, or that it will just be up to us to sleuth it out as we read along. Anyway, one great and rather cheeky example of such a disclosure comes from the Irish-American writer Cyril Herbert Bretherton. Remember this name, it's a hell of a paper. And this is from an essay of his published in 1927. It flows as follows. "But what is democracy?" asks the reader, determined that before they permit themselves to be seduced into a fundamental controversy, that we shall know what the other is talking about. I reply, as the farmer said when they saw the hippopotamus, "There ain't no such animal." Democracy is a relative term, he writes, like whiskey. You remember the Scotchman said that some whiskey was better than others, but there was no bad whiskey. Some forms of government are more democratic than others. An oligarchy is more democratic than an autocracy. A constitutional system involving adult suffrage is more democratic, ceteris paribus, than one with a property qualification. And one which includes the referendum and initiative is more democratic than one which has neither. There is not, and never has been, a pure democracy, and there never will be. here, brother Bretherton. It's obvious that from this disclosure, we can better understand what Bretherton has in mind on the theme of popular rule, and we can then go about seeing if we agree or disagree with him, so that we can have a more on-point discussion about the subject. Now, if only the problem of semantic pluralism were as simple as that. Because, of course, the sign democracy as an object of collected letters, scratch on a page, or write on your computer, that word is not the only word used in the English language today, as Wolff wrote in 1947, to express a variation on the theme of rule by the people, or popular government, or collective governance. You see what I mean. In fact, that's also the case in languages other than English. In Estonian, there is ravavalitsus. That's a bit tricky to pronounce, which directly translated, and all of the translations you'll get are from this poor fellow speaking right now. Everything is amateurish, and I've done my best to be diligent. So correct me when I'm clearly wrong. So ravavalitsus means people's government. There's the Indonesian word kerakyatan. The article ke here means either to, into, for, or up, and rakyatan means people. So you might be able to phrase this as democracy means that there's something given to or into or done for the people, or something that's done to promote them, to up their condition. You've got the Uzbek term, shalk parvarlik. That's a compound term, as you can see here, made of two words, shalk being people and parvarlik means caring. How about that? Then you've got Volkssuveränität, or people's sovereignty in German, ludowactwo in Polish, which I believe means power or people power. In Ukrainian, you've got prosty люди, or just common people. Right? It's enough to say common people, and you have a direction of government. In Russian, narodovlastie, or power to the people. Perhaps we could see a bit more of that happening now. And in the Maori, we have a phrase, ta ate nuinga I wakatau ai, or the majority have decided. There are examples like this in scores and scores of other languages. In Hindi, there are at least 6 different ways to say democracy. In the Thai language, there's at least 5. There's also at least 5 in Japanese, 4 in Vietnamese, 3 in Korean, and 3 in Telugu. Compounding the problem of semantic pluralism is that none of these words hold a single meaning by their users. For example, the many ancient cities that spoke some variations of the Greek tongue thousands of years ago not only understood and practiced demokratia differently to each other, right, one from the other, we've got the situation of today's Greek people who are obviously not practicing the same sorts of demokratia as these ancient polities did, although some people today are quite passionate about resurrecting some forms of this, and I think we know this quite well with the return of allocracy or allotocracy. And whilst they want this, they also don't want to bring over the rather poor practices of very limited franchises and slavery, of course, as many of these polities had done historically. So what's dawning on us here is that there are not simply many variations on the theme, Mr. Wolff. There is rather an extreme quantity of variations that really do make the probability that one will not be easily understood by others in this world to be quite low, right? The chances are you've probably got some idea of what this democracy, etc. thing is, or maybe you're not using the word at all and you come in with svara aji, that's Hindi for the practice of autonomy, or nen dan chu, that's Vietnamese for the rule of the people in the background. Take that into consideration. Nen being background, dan people, chu power. There's something quite Taoist in this. You've got the word minsei from Japanese, and that translates quite nicely into government by the people. Ilban gugmin in Korean, which is just general public. It's another one of those words. And you've got prajasvamyan in Telugu, which means public ownership, or lokashahi in Gujarati. And that means the people who write their own laws. So if you break down that word, lokashahi, lok is people, shahi is ink. And if you run the etymology on these characters, lok is composed of a word, lehum, which means to take. This is their verb form, to take. So if you add the diacritical mark in their script for ka, it's kind of like an English way of just saying the word or the letter ka, you get loka. What a strange thing. They define in this way taking people who take maybe from the land or from relationships, and of course we all have to do this. So then you've got these taking people who have to form some kind of organization, and they propose to do that through ink. So you see, if you break it down like that, you get quite a different spin on other ways of approaching this theme of popular rule and so forth. Now, I'll refer to this collective of nouns from now on as democracy, etc., or minju, etc., and so forth. I think you'll catch on. So we need to talk about Tocqueville. Let's go back in time a bit to the early-ish 19th century. There's a lovely looking place, if Google Maps is anything to go by, in the north of France, close to the English or French Channel, called the Château de Tocqueville. I'm guessing that we're all to some degree familiar with the particular son of that home who came to write some things about democracy, etc., chiefly from his observations of the theme in parts of the United States in what was then and remains the British Dominion of North America. This is also known as Canada. You see, Tocqueville was not just a student, like us, of democracy, etc., but he was also a politician. So, unlike, I imagine, most of us, he actually did things. The person I'm bringing, the reason, I beg your pardon, I'm bringing him up from the past is because he's one of very few, insofar as I've read anyway, and I like to think I've read quite a bit by now, he's one of very few who have captured the problem of democracy, etc.'s semantic pluralism, both from the angle of the scholar and from the angle of the practitioner. For example, in 1835, de Tocqueville makes the following claim: "It is our way of using the words democracy and democratic government that generates confusion, and that this confusion presents an opportunity for demagogues and despots, neither a friend to the theme of popular rule, to take advantage of us." This is Tocqueville's position. Whilst I, like a pig following the truffle, think unsurprisingly that Tocqueville is right in the part of his assertion that there are many ways for defining or practicing democracy or democratic government, and that this, without clarification, generates some degree of confusion, he does overstep and makes a mistake in saying this confusion opens opportunities for anti-democrats to take hold. And that's because for Tocqueville to be right, there has to be a right meaning for democracy and democratic government in the first place. In other words, for his claim to work, somebody has already got to think that they have the answer, right? That they have the truth, or that others do not, and therefore they're wrong and in need of some educating. So see what happened there. Of course, many people before, alongside, and after Tocqueville have thought as much. And they are assuming that they are right and others are wrong. And this, I assure you, has generated some pretty wild outcomes in the name of democracy, etc., in our world, on this planet we co-inhabit with so many others. So let's hop around a bit with a few examples and practice some circular time. First, there's Herbert Spencer in 1851, who in his book Social Statistics rips it with the following lines. A democracy properly so called is a political organization modeled in accordance with the law of equal freedom. And if so, those cannot be called democracies under which, as under the Greek and the Roman governments, from 4/5 to 11/12 of the people were slaves. Neither can those be called democracies which, like the constitutions of medieval Italy, conferred power on the burghers and nobles only. Nor can those be called democracies which, like the Swiss states, have always treated a certain unincorporated class as political outlaws. Enlarged aristocracies, these should be termed, not democracies. Now imagine Spencer sitting just there in front of us, having dinner table, and he's talking to some poor person. He's talking their ear off, democracy this, democracy that. And let's plonk Candidus, not Candida, from 1792 next to him. So there was a time, Candidus interrupts Spencer, when the country of Holland had no less than 32 democratic republics. In Amsterdam, Gouda, Rotterdam, Leyden, and so forth, the guildsmen, the tradesmen, and educated men kept those bloodthirsty and absolutist monarchs from France and Spain honest by fending them off and ensuring they paid back their debts to the good business peoples, the free peoples of those very fine cities. All right, cut now to Herbert Spencer's face, right? Just imagine it. It's a shred of lettuce hanging incredulously from his lips. How could this be? Now, J.S. Mackenzie from 1906 has heard it all, and in a bid to keep the peace at the table, he says, it will probably be wise not to attempt any precise definition of the term, quote-unquote, democracy. It has been used in various senses, wider and narrower, looser and more exact, but for our present purpose, it is perhaps enough to connect it with its common popular description. Government of the people, by the people, for the people. Now, Candidus and Spencer both look at each other at this point, pick up their drinks, and leave the table, muttering, what the hell does that even mean? Right? It's quite vexing. It's quite confusing to run into these different admissions. It's very hard to find a place where you can commonly step into when you have these three different ways of going about defining democracy. So you see, there really is no way around it. There will always be someone who's going to have a different understanding of democracy, etc., that you could very well find deplorable. Some are happy to elect a king and advisors, or a parliament of educated or wealthy or just well-connected people. So long as the majority of the people retain sovereignty, means that the king or these elites in an assembly are the servants of the people. They can be recalled, chastised, replaced if they perform poorly. That said, other sorts of people, conversely, are happy to have nothing to do with any sort of democracy, etc. Not voting, not protesting, not anything. They couldn't care less, but they still want to live in a well-functioning democracy. This is the catch. This oxymoronic situation is, by the by, called stealth democracy. So you can have a read onto this literature. And then you've got other sorts of people who want random assemblies to rule together for short periods of time, or they want for elites to mix with random people, or for governments to be informed by deliberative assemblies so that they make better, more informed or balanced policies. And then there are those others, I think we all know one of them perhaps, who are visible both historically and now, and who maintain that no one but, say, their God, or an idea like the free market or communism, has sovereignty, and that all people must therefore submit to the power of those things, those ideas, and naturally to the power of the people licensed to commune with those things. This is precisely how one person's demagogue is another person's preferred choice, and how one person's despot is another person's desired leader. So Tocqueville was right to say we need to cut through the confusion, but he was wrong to think that we can do anything beyond that through the function of clarification.